Now I'm going to use a weird analogy for this one, but I think a good phone should be so great that you don't really think about it. Let's take a pair of shoes, for example. Once you put the shoes on, you're on your way wherever you have to go, and it should feel like that for the whole day. Sure, it might get a little tight if you wear them for, let's say, 12 hours or so, but overall, a good pair of shoes will enable you to do what you have to do. Now, it sounds weird, but I think a good phone should be exactly the same. Once you grab your phone, it should blend into the day. It should open tasks and apps seamlessly and in a sense be forgotten about as soon as you lock the screen. Now, it doesn't mean that you're not using your phone a lot. It just means that the phone becomes a conduit for things you want to get done, kind of like how a good pair of shoes lets you go wherever you want to go without thinking about it. Now, I think Apple has achieved that for the most part over the last couple of years, but there are recent pain points. It feels like that tiny pebble that's in your shoe that you can't seem to just get out. And I'll go over a few lists of pros and cons using the 16 Pro Max over the last few months. Now, pro number one is the screen. It's big, and it's admittedly a little bit too big for me for one-handed use. However, I do find that most of the time, I do prefer to use two hands when using my phone, especially when searching for something or typing on it. And like using a larger screen after using a smaller one, it's a welcomed increase in size. Now, it's not necessary, but it just makes the user experience a bit more friendly, easier on the eyes, slightly more immersive, and dare I say, a little bit more premium feeling. Now, on the phone, I'm usually doing one of four things. I'm checking an email, or I'm looking at social media, I'm reading Reddit, or I'm browsing Safari. And the larger screen generally helps with this. Now, I know you can increase the text size, but something about having a larger screen just falls easier on the eyes. Now, it's not a huge increase from the 15 Pro Max, but overall, I appreciate the viewing experience on the Pro Max series that doesn't leave me wanting for more. And dare I say it, I wouldn't even mind a slightly bigger increase on the screen, but I might be in the minority here. Pro number two is just how it works. Okay, so initially the iOS 18 launch was a flop where it drained the battery and also the touchscreen sensitivity was way off. But the current iOS with 18.1 and 18.2 lets the phone work as it's supposed to. Even when you have apps open in Safari with a bunch of tabs open, like 20 plus tabs, the allocation of RAM and processing power is flawless, giving you a buttery user experience that you would expect from an iPhone, or at least an iPhone Pro. This is important because if you're experiencing lagging or hesitation or just jitteriness, or you feel like you constantly have to close certain apps, it's taking up too much mental bandwidth already. But this really hasn't been that big of an issue for the iPhone Pro series in the last couple of years. Pro number three is indeed the photo button. Now, it's giving me a surprising amount of desire to just grab my phone and take pictures or videos of whether my dog or just outings in general. Being able to grab my phone and not think about having to tap the screen is actually a really big game changer. It's a function I never knew that I needed. Much more useful than the action button, which I barely use. It feels a bit psychological, but even removing that little bit of inertia of tapping or looking for the camera button on the lock screen to now this button is a huge change. Just being able to put your hand in your pocket, grab your phone, and the camera button falls right under your thumb, it completely removes any hesitation, and it's not a gimmick. It works really well. Now, as for cons, it's actually a double-edged sword, which is the screen size in itself. It always has felt a little bit too big. Now, I love the extra screen real estate, and again, as I said, I would not mind a larger screen. But with that said, it just adds bulkiness, less ergonomics when using with one hand, and slightly heavier, which depending on the person could be a pro or con for you. If falling back on my analogy of shoes, it's kind of like that pair of lightweight boots that you own that are comfortable, but you're just reminded every time you put them on that they're not your lightweight running sneakers. Now, the second con for me is a little bit harder to show, but it's really just the overall user experience of iOS 18. Now, the weird photo album update, which has already been railed, the initial terrible battery drain, and the screen sensitivity that I mentioned with the initial iOS 18 launch. All these things were annoying, but they were smoothened out with iOS 18.1 and 0.2. But design flaws, as I mentioned, the photo album, or even the control center, which I feel like is a cluttered mess. I tried to remove certain things and I just added some redundancy just for ease of use. Or even the mail app, where it has now a primary or an all mail function, which I get. All mail is all mail literally, but then the first thing that they show you is primary, and that's kind of the default setting, which I don't want. Or even, for example, I don't use Siri at all. If anything, it's a function that I haven't been using, or maybe exactly the same, just for setting up timers or something like that. But all of these iOS 18 updates for me haven't been that big of an update. If anything, they just cause a little bit more inertia for the user experience on my end. So is the iPhone 16 Pro Max a perfect pair of shoes or boots? And the answer is no. It's more like that everyday boot that you actually do like to wear, but every time you wear them, you're just reminded that they're not like your lightweight sneakers. They've added so much to it, or at least the software, that it feels slightly clunky, and of course, it's a little big in the hands for me at least. Now, I get that the iOS team is probably under pressure to keep things looking fresh, fun, and new, but I feel like they strayed from the original ethos of Steve Jobs, which is to marry simplicity and functionality with beautiful hardware. The hardware is beautiful. Now, it's a little bit long in the tooth, but the simplicity of the iOS seems to have been forgotten. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.